This is toy. You think you can spin me with a half-coy glam of a slayer been dust more than 2 sen? You're lower than a lurk. For 7 years, Joss Whedon's cult hit Buffy the Vampire Slayer dazzled international television audiences with its warmth, whimsicality, and wit. In fact, it developed such a following that today, almost 8 years after the series finale, the canonical continuation of the series, entitled Buffy Season 8, remains one of the 10 top best-selling comic books every month. During its television run, Buffy became known as the revolutionary show that gave America 7 big bads, 6 main character deaths, a 5-season spin-off, a fanged family of 4, 3 sassy slayers, 2 spellcasting sisters of Sappho, and 1 innovative take on the English language. Dubbed Slayer slang, this method of speech, first created for use by characters in the world of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, has since been adopted and popularized by fans worldwide. Today, I'm going to tell you about the history of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the unique style of language utilized by its characters, as well as provide you with a few examples of that style. Let's begin with a brief overview of the history of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Almost 20 years ago, Buffy the Vampire Slayer began as an idea in the head of Joss Whedon, an idea he first called Rhonda the Immortal Waitress. In 1991, Whedon drafted a film script that he then began pitching to producers. The film centered around a blonde cheerleader who defied horror cliches, the blonde girl in the alley, and who negated negative female stereotypes at the time. In 1992, the film was produced and was a huge flop. In 1996, Gail Berman of the fledgling Warner Brothers network picked up the series. In the spring of 1997, Buffy had found its home. As I mentioned previously, Buffy has left an outstanding mark on the world, its legacy even going as far as to impact the English language. Remember the quote I read earlier? Does anyone understand what it means? You probably shouldn't. It's a very advanced version of Slayer slang, known to fans as phrase speak, set in the world of Buffy the Vampire Slayer 400 years in the future. There are a surprising number of terms coined through Slayer slang. The topic of study of Buffy studies and Slayer slang have been very popular since the series premiere. Slayer slang has slowly made its way into everyday language. Hundreds of journals and articles exist on the topic of Slayer slang. Many of you probably incorporate Slayer slang into your daily speech without even realizing it. I'm sure some of you are asking, why Buffy? What does this character, or this show for this matter, have anything to do with language? Well, Buffy studies scholar Michael Adams writes, after her self-sacrifice, Buffy is buried under a headstone that reads, "She saved the world, a lot." What does it mean for the American English that the world's protector, its thoroughly contemporary American savior, is a rapid-fire quipster, a hip teen who knows the language of her place and time, but who by virtue of her role as the Slayer, however hesitantly accepted, is necessarily an unacknowledged hero, an essentially normal person whose destiny casts her out of the mainstream, whose status paradoxically erases her status in the conventional world. Buffy needs slang as a means of shrugging off a millennial of expectations, as a weapon, and as an expression of personality officially denied her by her role. In a sense, she is slang, as are those who associate with her. Now that you have some idea of the function of Slayer slang, I'm going to share a few of its more common aspects. There are 16 official categories of Slayer slang. Today, we're only going to talk about 3 of them. The first we're going to discuss is the addition of the suffix y to change any word or phrase to an adjective. For example, if you take the word commander and through the use of Slayer slang add the suffix y, you end up with the adjective commandery, which would be like a commander. In a different sense, if you take a word such as fang and add a y, you end up with the adjective fangy, which implies that whatever is fangy has fangs. And the final and least frequently appearing example would be to take a proper noun. For example, Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness plus y yields heart of darknessy, or reminiscent of Conrad's piece. The second addition we're going to talk about would be the suffix ness. Like in standard English, it converts words to nouns. It also, uniquely in use in Slayer slang, creates the quality of being. For example, with a Slayer slang use of the suffix ness, one would take the word math and say that math has a certain mathness to it, and create a noun that talks about the essence of being. The third aspect I'm going to discuss is the use of the word much as an adjective instead of as an adverb. This is perhaps the most common trait to infiltrate the English language. You use the simple present tense verb plus the word much plus an interrogative. Some examples from the series include pathetic much, antagonize much, and respect the narrative flow much. Now that you have an idea of the history of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, its impact on the English language, and have even heard a few linguistic examples of grammatical structures that have been integrated into common speech, do you see how an abundance of small aspectual and grammatical alterations can turn a perfectly normal sentence into the mess that you heard at the beginning of this speech? So, next time you utter a sentence that doesn't belong in a textbook, think about where and how some of that slang may have gotten started. Who knows? Maybe it's Slayer slang popping up in your lexicon.